to bring to the stage a voice that we all hear and that we all respect, the morning newscaster for KQED and the host of the upcoming national broadcast from Public Radio International, Truth Be Told, Mr. Joshua Johnson.
From KQED. I assume everybody can hear me clearly. I'm almost scared of these speakers. I'm going to back up just a little bit. But it's good to be here. Thank you for having us here on such an important occasion to talk about such an important topic. But I know you did not come here to hear me. You can hear me on the radio, and I talk too much as it is. So let me get to our guests and tell you how this is going to go. I've got a few questions for them, about 20, 25 minutes worth. Then we want to open it up to you. Whatever questions you might have for our esteemed guests, we definitely want to give you time to speak to them directly and to ask them whatever's on your mind. This is an event that is geared to people who grew up with the Black Panthers as a constant in their lives, and maybe for some of you who are younger, who maybe have only read about them in the history books. This is a chance to ask some direct questions to people who are definitely living history, and living a history that is not over, living a history that is still relevant right now, today. And without spoiling the presentation, my very first question is going to be about what's happening right now today. So let's get into it with our two guests. A former chairman of the Black Panther Party, she's an author and an activist today. We'll also be speaking to a former member of the party, the older brother of co-founder Huey P. Newton, and a longtime professor at Merritt College in Oakland. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Elaine Brown and Melvin Newton. Considering that there was some very ardent protest earlier today, considering that that seems to be the hot topic in San Francisco right now in terms of racial justice, and especially because one of the core tenets of the Black Panther Party foundationally had to do with issues of police brutality. We heard the protests that were earlier today. We know that there is a letter that's been circulated by more than 100 lawyers now calling for an independent investigation. The demands keep coming for San Francisco's police chief, Greg Sir, to be fired and for someone else to be in charge of reforming the public. If Mayor Lee, on his way out and on your way in, had stopped to listen and said, Mr. Newton, Ms. Brown, I can't solve this. What should I do? What would your suggestion to Mayor Ed Lee be in terms of how to resolve this?
Well, I would think that either he's going to fire Chief Sir or resign from his own position.
Why not allow Chief Sir, and I'm just asking an honest question, I'm sure there are plenty of people who might think, well, if the chief is genuine about mending fences, give him a chance to work with the community and try to mend fences and find a way to make peace and keep his job. Is that not possible?
Well, this is not a mending fence piece. This is not we're all going to talk about can we sing in the choir and harmony and all get sing about something. This is a brother who was murdered and assassinated, brutally murdered by the San Francisco police. The chief has done nothing. The DA has done nothing. The mayor has done nothing. There's really nothing else to talk about. These people need to go be brought on trial, put on trial for the murder that they committed. This is not a complicated situation. Nobody trying to mend the fence because that is already broken at this point. Everything is broken.
What you thought about the Mario Woods controversy? What should be done?
It's a very broad question. Mario Woods in San Francisco is just one part of what's happening all over this country. In my opinion, none of this is going to be resolved until we make some institutional change, because the way police departments operate and the way they're trained and the way they're hired has a lot to do with what happens to citizens who are in need of help and end up being victims of the police. If we're going to do the right thing about all of us, about the citizens of this country, and about people who call the police for help and then the police attack them, then who do you call when the police are beating you up? That's the question. The training of police and who the police are and how they're put together, and maybe we don't need a singularly organization called police department. Maybe we need police departments, and maybe we need specialized areas to deal with people who have psychological problems, mental problems, poverty. And it takes time to do that. This whole country needs to address that. How do we protect and help citizens? You see, what happens is, let me give you an example. We're a family, we're having some problems, and Elaine is threatened by the big brother over here, and the little brother is afraid, and that's me when I run to the phone and call the police because I need help. Without thinking, the police are not trained to help. They're trained to come in and enforce whatever law they think is enforceable. So it comes right back to all of us. We're all involved in this. We can't let the police themselves. It's up to us to say, we want a new police. We want a new organization. We want the people's police. We want a police department that addresses the need of a current society. A society that has people in it. That when the police come out, or we don't even need to call them police. We need to call them auxiliary forces that come out to address Mario. Look, Mario is
department we have today.
What?
Something other than the kind of police department we have today.
Totally. Absolutely.
You know, last week I had
Mario, I don't want to
Go ahead.
think about it. Mario is this little guy, I'm 5'6", I weigh, I guess I used to weigh more. 160 pounds. I could have taken a knife from him.
Last week, I had the pleasure of speaking to Clarence Jones, who was an attorney and a speechwriter for Martin Luther King Jr. And I asked Dr. Jones if Dr. King was alive today, what would he think of the Black Lives Matter movement? And Dr. Jones said that from his view, Dr. King would be 100% in support of Black Lives Matter because it was a perfect representation of the authenticity, the integrity, and the willingness to resist of the nonviolent civil rights movement. He thought that Dr. King would be right on the front lines with everyone's Black Lives Matter, cheering them on, embracing them. What connections do we draw between Black Lives Matter and the Black Panther Party? Do you see any of the legacy of what you did in what the movement is today?
Well, first thing I'd like to say is that if Martin Luther King had been alive today, he would have been outside protesting with the rest of the protesters when somebody brought the mayor in here on the celebration. It's an absolute insult to come to this event and be the mayor of the city and have done nothing at all about this brother. And of course, we know that there's only one. I think that the most significant thing as to the Black Lives Matter piece is that the Black Panther Party was an organization that existed in the community, and we served the community, and we had an agenda. Our agenda was revolution. And so I think that if we want to examine and compare, we're always going to support protest against the status quo because the status quo has kept Black and many other people, brown people, red people, and poor white people oppressed since the beginning of this country. So we're always going to support, we would support the Black Lives Matter concept of protest. But we would have to say that if you look at the example of the Black Panther Party, when we said we want an end to police brutality, we decided that we would patrol the streets of the Black community ourselves to make sure that the police acted correctly, and we did that with guns. When we said that people shouldn't be hungry, we fed people. When we said that people needed health care, we provided free care. So action is the most important thing, and I think that would be something that Huey Newton certainly would say, quoting Che Guevara, as we always said, words are beautiful, but actions are supreme.
think there's something about that image of revolution that is very powerful and also kind of scary to people who aren't ready for it. And I think maybe that's why so many people have been very warmly embracing of the legacy of Dr. King, but when you ask them about the Black Panthers, and his 50th anniversary is a great chance to kind of retell the story, people kind of, they just bristle at this idea of like, the berets and leather jackets and guns, and like it's kind of an intimidating image. Could you talk about how that image came about the decision, not to be similarly in the same vein as Dr. King, but to do something with a little bit more attitude, a little bit more in your face? Where did that come from?
Well, Dr. King had his place, and Dr. King was recognized by the Black Panther Party as a person who was moving in the direction of humanity. Dr. King, you asked about the current movement that we have of people who are outside the theater just a little while ago. They're about the community itself. And Dr. King was in the South one day, and he evolved from the South. And the Black Panther Party was the next step, and it was in the West. It was composed of people who had migrated from the South, so you wouldn't expect the movement to be exactly the same. But it recognized everything that had been done before. Not only Dr. King, but W.E.B. Du Bois, and John Brown, and Frederick Douglass. And the Black Panther Party was avant-garde, and it was current, and it was, listen, what just happened with what's happening across the country was addressed by the Black Panther Party in 1966 and 1968. And the kinds of things we have. Black Panther Party, Huey said that we were no longer nations, that we were communities, that we were people, that nations had lost their status. And if you look at what's going on in the Middle East, and what's going on across the world, is we become an empire. And the empire now has to address the subjects. And when you start to address the subjects that stretched out all over the world, much as the Roman Empire, when it became too big, and the soldiers were no longer even Romans, and they became career soldiers. And what do we have now? Our army is a career army. I favor the draft. And why do I favor the draft? Because I want the senators' children to be subject to it, just as my children are subject to it.
I just want to make sure I take your point in terms of the imagery. It sounds like what you're saying is that the Black Panther Party was trying to speak to something that was emerging beyond just the segregated South, but that was speaking to maybe where younger blacks were coming from in terms of the way they were reacting to these issues, not just from a Southern perspective, but from the West Coast and
well, I want to say this, because the word revolution is very important. The Black Panther Party called for a revolution in the United States, and so did Dr. King, but this is a Dr. King that we don't want to remember. So we have reduced him to a namby-pamby, two-dimensional 1963 person who died in 1963, talking about going up the mountainside and children holding each other's hands. Nobody remember what the dream was. But Dr. King was very clear, because in 1967, when he talks about the greatest speech to me that he ever made, where do we go from here? He talks about how black people had half of what still, even with the Voting Rights Act coming and so forth, still had half of what is good. Voting Rights and the Civil Rights Acts haven't been just passed. We still had half of what was good and double of what was bad. And called for a Poor People's March and a campaign. He called for the occupation of the capital of the United States to demand guaranteed income and redistribution. Now, that is nothing to say, then I don't know where it's coming from. Because the Black Panther Party was, as Melvin stated, a continuation and a part of what we call the freedom movement. Some people call civil rights movement, black rights. No, there was no hashtags then. We also were part of the freedom movement. Oh, freedom over me, and before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. Part of a worldwide movement for freedom against, as Melvin indicates, an empire. But here in the United States, or as we used to say, the belly of the beast, right here, we were as much a part of that as was the Nation of Islam, as was SNCC, as was CORE, and a number of organizations. We were all doing something slightly different. But we were not at odds with Dr. King, that militant, non-militant, that, black power versus civil rights or whatever. There was a continuum and a relationship, just as Martin Luther King and Malcolm X embraced it in 1964. Had we had the opportunity, we would have certainly had Huey Newton embracing Dr. King. So that should be cleared up, and we shouldn't continue to use this imagery of Dr. King as some guy who just all he believed in was nonviolence, and we're going to have a service day. That's not who King was. Let's have the poor people campaign.
I think a lot of people kind of, it's easy to whitewash, for lack of a better word. Vocabulary fails us. It didn't, exactly. Okay, there you go. This image, and presume that he didn't tell people that we need to, to occupy federal land, that we need to boycott this brand and that bank, which he did very specifically. He said, don't spend your money there, put your money there. That was part of the movement. I think maybe it's easy for some people to sanitize Dr. King's image and demonize the Black Panther's image, honestly, because you carry guns. I think the guns thing freaked people out. In fact, California changed its gun control laws in 1967 to ban the Black Panthers from doing what they were doing. There used to be patrols where you would show up at the scenes of arrests and kind of apprise people of their rights from like 10 feet away, but you were carrying guns in public, and California changed its laws specifically to stop the Black Panthers from doing that. And yet today, there's this group of guys in Oregon who's on federal land. This idea that, and I've seen all these protests on TV, and I'm like, I understand why there are no black faces in that group. It's a group of all white men, and they're carrying these gigantic guns, and no one wants to touch them. But when it was the Black Panther Party, it was a completely different story.
Mario Woods and his little knife that he had in his hand wouldn't work much. I want to say this about that. It's so obvious that the racism is so palpable in America, it's almost hard not to talk about it. That's all that is. That's just, hey, white men with guns, that's okay. When Billy Bob shoots up the school and kills 25 people, one of them will be in mental illness. Was little Billy Bob upset today? 25 people, but that's okay. All of the children in the classroom. We just have, so we already know that this racism is embedded in this country from day one, from the day they wiped out the Powhatan Confederacy and formed Jamestown. So that part is pretty clear. But I do want to say this, that J. Edgar Hoover, in announcing and making it clear that there were these counterintelligence protocol, COINTELPRO, that the FBI was waging a war against in the beginning, in the 50s, against certainly the Communist Party was a detail, but the Nation of Islam was targeted from the beginning. And as different black groups came up, we were called black hate groups. But the one thing Hoover said about the Black Panther Party, which he identified as the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States and an organization he was going to wipe out completely, he said, I'm not afraid of their guns. Well, now let's just think. The Black Panther Party, we were definitely strapped, and I like that idea too. I like it. We said, our
wait, hold on. Wait, you can't speed past that. Hold on. You said you like that idea, and I could...
No, I didn't like the idea, I liked the fact. It wasn't the idea. Of how people perceived us, we didn't try to become the police, we tried to encourage the people to recognize their right of self-defense. That was what we tried to do. But I say this to say Hoover specifically said, nobody's afraid of the Black Panther Party's guns. Now let's just look at it. We had a chapter here in Oakland. Huey went on trial for shooting a cop that shot him. You had chapters all over the country, but if we brought all of our guns, and we had significant guns for a black organization. Am I right, brother? But we brought all our guns here to San Francisco, and we went toe-to-toe with the San Francisco PD. They gonna call in the county, the state, National Guard, wait a minute, the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard, the FBI, the CIA, the ATF. This country is strapped to the gills. So why would anyone in a country that is selling arms all over the world and the most violent country right now, and from its history, how is somebody going to talk to me and worry about my little gun? What J. Hoover was worried about is that we were organizing people around their interests and that the masses were going to rise up against the government.
I do want to get to audience questions in just a minute. I could use the time with you on exactly how much time we have, but if you do have questions, I believe there will be microphones available. Okay, I think those are the ones that are stationed. There were, let there be and behold there was. I think those two mics. As you come forward with your questions, I would ask you to please keep them very brief. My apologies in advance if I have to cut you off to kind of elicit the question from you, but we want to spend less time asking questions and more time hearing answers. So please do keep your questions compact as soon as the microphone comes to you. Mr. Newton.
I wanted to follow Elaine's statement about the guns. No, Hoover really wasn't afraid of the guns. You know what he was afraid of? He was afraid of breakfast for children.
He was afraid of?
He was afraid of breakfast for children.
The free breakfast for children?
Yeah.
Why did that?
Well, because the service program, that was a service program, because it connected with the needs of the community. And when you connect with the needs of the community, they will follow you. And they will look to you as an example. And the Black Panther Party didn't think that they could win a war against the United States. It was a vanguard organization that was speaking to the people. And the people were to come out, and this speaks to the Black Lives Matter. I like that organization. And I like it because unlike an organization like the Panther Party and like other organizations, Kings or you can identify the leaders and you can attack them, but when you have Black Lives Matter and the kind of organizations that are happening now with these little cell phones, who do you go after? Because everyone can be involved. I encourage everyone to stay involved. And I would like to see, they call it Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter. And it's a coalition of people. When I see people in their marches and making their cases heard, it's everybody and anybody. Now, who are you going to follow home?
I'm going to ask you about some of the goals of the Black Panther Party before we go to questions, and then I'm going to dive into the audience. In October 1966, it's 50th anniversary that we're about to celebrate, and we will get into talking about how you are going to commemorate the 50th anniversary. Huey Newton and Bobby Seale wrote the 10-point plan for the Black Panther Party that formed the core of its demands. Things like decent housing, federally guaranteed employment or income, free health care, an end to police brutality. How successful would you say the party and its successors have been in achieving those points or even moving them forward? Clearly we have a way to go.
Here's what I would say. If you're going to measure quote-unquote success by are these things solved, then clearly that would be absolutely untrue. We have 50% of prisoners in America are Black people. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world. These are things we actually follow. Black people have the highest poverty rate in America. We have the lowest education level. We have the highest cancer death rates, highest maternal and infant mortality rates. So we look at the reality, not what we like to pretend because one or two Negroes gets up and thinks that they have made it because they got a job in somebody's plantation. But we have to look at where are our people as a group. And Dr. King said, in 67, we have half of what is good and double of what is bad. So we have to know that is the reality. But as to success, the very fact that here we are, Melvin and I, Melvin's older. But I'm 72 years old and I'm still standing and we're still getting this together. The time we're doing as much as we can do, but I think the very existence of the party is still and remains in the memory of Black and oppressed people around the world, not just here. We had people all over in China and in Western Europe and in all of Africa. You can talk about the Black Panther, and that example is something that continues to keep that flame of freedom and that hope for freedom alive. And I think that's our real legacy, is that we did what we did, and we died for it, we bled for it, and we still keep the message going. And again, as you said, I'd like to put in our advertisement. I hope everyone will come to Oakland on the 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd of October of this year. A lot of events at the Oakland Museum. We're handing out some cards, I hope, and we have handed them out, some of our comrades. And, just to remember to come and commemorate the founding, the 50th anniversary of the party, and the co-founder and leading, guiding genius of the party was Huey Newton. I'm proud and happy that Melvin is still here to carry that memory and keep that correct image alive, well among the people.
Before we go to audience questions, I was just going to ask you about the 50th anniversary. Was there anything else about the anniversary worth mentioning before we dive in? You said October 20th through 23rd at the Oakland Museum of California.
A lot of things at the Oakland Museum, but Oakland, we're going to hope to have all of Oakland dedicating, every day to the Black Panther Party, to the history, and so forth and so on. And we hope we invite everyone to participate. Nothing's going to cost them. We do have one big dinner. That would be on Saturday night at the Scottish Rite Center. But other than that, everything will be open and free. We'll have workshops and film and exhibits and everything that people can experience and go through the history of the party's activities.
Excellent. All right, let's get to some of your questions. Please do, when you ask your question, introduce yourself, your name, where you're from, what organization you're with, if any, and then please keep your questions very brief. Let's start with you.
Hi. I'm from Providence Baptist Church, located at Bayview, Hunts Point. We currently feed 150 men and women in our shelter. Every Thursday we feed our community all the way from Bayview to Marin City. My question is that where do we go from here? I used to be a member of URBA in Oakland. I had the pleasure of meeting Huey Newton when I was a young girl. I was taught to respect all people of all race. But where do we go from here? I'm 50 plus now years, and I still see the struggle. I still am an activist in my community. I try to help everyone, whatever color they are, whatever race, whatever needs they have. So where do we go from here as a young Black grandmother now? I want to teach my children that's coming up. I'm currently getting my degree in behavioral science.
Right.
And I want to get to these young kids and stop the violence.
Let's put that, thank you for the question. Let's put that to you, sir, if you would. Where do we go from here? What's the next step?
Well, I think the sister's already doing it. And I say keep on doing what you're doing. And 50-year-old grandmother's a very young person. Everybody under 78 looks younger than me. But let me say this. This ties in with the question that Elaine last addressed. And that we all can do something different. And we can do what we can do. Now, I'll make myself an example. One of the points in the 10-point program was about education. And I became an educator, and I spent 45 years doing it, not because I'm the greatest person in the world to do it, but I chose to do it. But I picked up the torch of the Black Panther Party. That Bobby Seale and Huey and other students advocated for education of Black people before there was a Black Panther Party. They carried it on into the Black Panther Party. I took the torch and spent the next 45 years trying to educate and impact people so that they would not have the miseducation that they'd had before about themselves. So that's the role that I played. And I like to think that there are thousands of people out there, and some of those people are in Black Lives Matter and other organizations as a result of that. and someone else is able to do something. If you're a doctor, then find what you can do as a doctor. But one of the other things that you can do, and this may sound maybe not quite revolutionary, get out and vote. Don't wait until the president is your city election, the local election, those in between. What happened to your president, our president, Barack Obama, we elected him, and then we didn't go out and vote when it came time to help him keep the people who would help him put his programs into place. We let the Republicans win, and look what happened. And the thing that's never said, and I have to say it, about the Barack Obama administration, they talk about, well, the Republicans, their whole program was not letting him do anything. But no one ever says this is racism. Underlying the Democratic Republican thing is racism is still alive and well. And he's been treated in such a way that no other president ever elected has been treated.
Let's keep going with the next
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's keep going with the next question. Hi.
The microphone here.
I don't actually know if there's a mic upstairs. Is there a mic upstairs?
Right.
Well, there's.
I'm not sure. We got this.
Calm down.
But I don't believe there's one upstairs.
Well, I first want to give honor for these two revolutionaries sitting on this stage. And I'll be honest, as a young up-and-coming revolutionary, I would like to understand how to create a movement within our current communities that are unfortunately being harassed and unpoliced by the police, which unfortunately the police never police our communities fairly. They basically just been there to contain us. The prison system is a replacement of slavery, which no longer applies. We have less than a year with President Obama being in office, and we have yet to demand that he do anything to create the change we want to see. And we have that power as a people. But I would like to address this to someone I admire so much, Miss Elaine Brown, and ask her personally, how do we get the people to take back their power like you guys did when you created the Black Panther Party and all the movements that they created in the community?
I'm going to ask you, we're running low on time, so I'm going to ask you if you could keep your answer short and we'll try to
Okay, I
answer some more
want to
questions.
very briefly say that you're correct. We have to have organization. The one great thing that ties all of us in the Black Panther Party is that we made a commitment of our very lives. And we threw down and we stayed in the community. We didn't go back and forth and do this or that. We only did that one thing. It was hard as hell to be in the Black Panther Party. What I'm doing today is all that I've taken from the party as an individual, but we absolutely cannot operate as individuals. We have to have organization, and that is up to you, but you got to find, if you had Huey and Bobby to start this group in Oakland and it's spread across the country, it can be done, and it can be done by just the beginning, you and me, for example. I right now at 7th and Campbell in West Oakland, those of you from Oakland, from the old town know where West Oakland is, 7th and Campbell, I've got a 3/4 acre piece of property on which I'm doing exactly what I would have done in the Black Panther Party. I've been fortunate enough to be able to pull those pieces together. So I'm creating business, for-profit businesses. I'm a nonprofit creating for-profit businesses to be cooperatively owned by formerly incarcerated people. We have urban $20 an hour cash money, and yes, because everybody ain't got a checking account. And we're going to build some seriously affordable housing, that is to say, and available for people with no criminal background checks and so forth. So I'm using that as a model to create 5 other businesses so that we can then have a core of people who understand what self-determination is, because that's what freedom really is.
Let's see if we can do 2 more questions, one over here and one over here. I wish we had more time, but let's keep going with you, man. Hello.
Hi, yes, my name is Brigitte, and I would like to address this to anyone on the panel. My question is how can we, what do you suggest us as a Black race, what should we be doing with the discrimination that sits within our own race based on color, skin color, financial status.
All right.
You know, what do you suggest that we do to come together as a whole so that we can attack any other issues that are at hand?
Would you take that on, sir? What do we do about the infighting among our own people so that we can unite on the bigger things?
Don't let that get in the way. You're always going to have infighting when you have more than 3 people. So what you have to do is deal with the infighting, recognize. I thought we had gotten past the color thing, but we still have other.
But so it's just something you got to get over and work through it.
Well, I want to say one very quickly that, we are a people that have never had a land. They stole our language, our flag, where's my dance, my history, my religion, and so forth. So we have arrived and become this unique blend of people that started out as African people and are African people and have been through slavery. We have only been on the plantation. We've never had a house of our own. We've only been in Master's house. So we've adopted Master's cultural ways. Light skin means something, so-called good hair, bad hair. Then you get into some really deep issues, like, the size of your feet and whether all these other kinds of things. But we hate each other. But we don't hate each other because this comes from some inherent thing in us. This is a cultural norm that was created by the races that enslaved us. So the biggest thing we do have to do is be truthful and say this is where we are, but recognize there is a we somewhere in here, that we are united by our African heritage and by our history of slavery in this country, and that we do form a people that have to love each other, and that's the only way we're going to be free. That is necessary. How you do it, we just have to, as Melvin said, go through it, but we do have to at least acknowledge there is still a problem among us on some of the smallest things in the world.
Yes, yes. Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Tim Weeks. I'm an education researcher at San Francisco State and a doctoral candidate. And I'm also a retired math teacher from Oakland and Richmond. And I was actually raised in the Black Panther Party. I was born February 3rd, 1963. Went to my first Black Panther Party meeting October 1968 with my brother in Atlantic City, New Jersey. So I was raised in Panthers. Somebody who wasn't mentioned, and I just want to make a quote from him, he said, "Be careful about integrating into a burned building." And even though we have achieved economic and almost social equity in that we're making almost as much as the majority, and we can live in neighborhoods we couldn't live in before, and we have achieved economic success, has it come at a price spiritually and culturally, and as far as the unity? Because when I grew up, I felt that there was a struggle within the black people that transcended generations. It was one that we had as kids in high school, that we saw with our parents and with our uncles and our grandchildren. And I felt that that struggle kind of united us together. And they also said one of the greatest tricks the devil ever did was to make the world believe he doesn't exist. And I believe today we feel like there really is no struggle. So even though we have achieved some measure of economic success and we've moved forward in some areas, has it come at a price culturally, spiritually, and with the unity of our people?
I want to say something about that, because he always said, I learned everything I know just about from Huey Newton. I consider him to be a genius and the only person I would ever call my leader in the way that I followed what I did as a member of the Black Panther Party. And one of the things that we learned as dialectical materialists is that in order to come to a correct conclusion, you have to have a correct analysis. It has to be based on fact. I don't know where you get the idea that we have any kind of economic parity in this country, because we have the highest poverty levels, lowest home ownership levels, and only 1% or less of all business revenues in America come from black-owned businesses. So that we can't start with a premise that isn't correct. Now, because we may have a loan, a rented car, a credit card, an iPhone, or whatever, this is not an example of economic parity.
Well, I say parity. I think we're cheating more
at
equality.
Debate, I'm here to respond.
Okay, go ahead.
My response is that we have to recognize we are not free people. We don't own or control anything in the United States of America as a group, or even as individuals. If I take out Obama and Oprah, you don't have much left of Jay-Z. We have to recognize that as a people, we are dependent on an oppressor for our very survival. And in order for us to get past that, using example of Black Panther Party, we can get back to the question of our survival as a people and then talk about our freedom as a people. And that to me is critical, that we don't delude ourselves into thinking that everything is going well or something is good. It's not going well.
Last question, unless somebody stops me.
Hello.
Stop me so you get to ask the last question.
Thank you so much. This is really a great discussion. By the way, this is the 50th anniversary of the Super Bowl, but how about if we cover all those signs with 50th anniversary of the Black Panther Party? So my question is, I'm part of the People's Campaign. We're meeting tomorrow night, Tuesday, 7 p.m. at the Redstone Building, and we're working on creating two fronts. One, learning real democracy, direct democracy, in which every voice counts, and in which we have consensus and shared values and still stay in the face of the establishment. But I think we need to organize and create and learn and experience true democracy. This country has never had that, and since the indigenous people. Do you agree?
Yes. But we've never had true democracy.
No, there has been no democracy. First of all, I'm not sure that democracy is what's really needed, because I think of it as mob rule, because if the majority always wins, the minority always has a problem.
But consensus is
I'm not debating.
Honestly.
So what I'm saying is that when you form a country, which was formed as a company, the London Company, so let's not get it twisted, it was never a country, it was a company. And the London Company supported, and I'm not talking about all the other oppressive groups from Spain and from France and so forth. I'm talking about the English coming in and murdering all 30 tribes of the Powhatan Confederacy, all Pocahontas people, and Daddy and everybody else, to form something called Jamestown, which is the first so-called settlement in what became the United States of America. After that, it's a wrap. You have nothing but African people coming in as slaves, Native people being wiped out left and right as their lands are raped and stolen and people are destroyed. At what point do we talk about this? Let's go back to the democracy. They formed a country in 1776 when the slaveholders had become the richest men in the world. Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the so-called Declaration of Independence, a slaveholder and a rapist himself. So at what point do we talk about we had a country that was based on any kind of democratic principles of fairness?
The whole notion of democracy is an ideal. We've never had it, and we can't have it. And when we had hunting and gathering societies, we had democracy because they were small enough for people to be equally represented. After 1776, that wasn't democracy either. That was landed white men were the people who could vote. What we have now is we have a representative republic is what we have. We have people that we elect and they supposedly represent us. So that's where we are. Unless it's not possible to have democracy. We delude ourselves if we think that we're too large for that, it's too big. The closest thing that we can have as democracy is in our own community. The smaller you get, closer you can come to having democracy. You may be able to have it in a small city, but that's esoteric and theoretical, and I don't know.
Go right ahead, okay. What's your question?
I just want to first off, thank you very much for coming out and taking the time to be here with us. You two were not revolutionary. You are a revolutionary. My name is Peyton Silk, and I'm a 17-year-old high school student right now. So what I want to do is, me and two of my good friends, we started an idea called Black Youth in Action. And what we want to do is basically similar to what the Black Panther Party did, and we want it to be specifically for youth. Because in all of these organizations with Black Lives Matter and Mario Woods, it is great, but it's not specifically for youth and for youth to get their voice out. It is a very good way to get the communal voice out, but we want youth, so 18 and below, so we're starting from the age of 14. And our vision is to educate educate ourselves and then go out and have demonstrations. So do you have any advice for someone that's trying to start this up of key steps that need to be taken in order to get this off the ground?
Give us your name again, please.
Peyton Silken.
Peyton, come find me after this event. I need to talk to you.
I will.
Don't leave without talking to you.
Right there?
Down stage left. Do not leave without talking to you. Go ahead.
So first of all, just so you know, we used to be young. He was only 24 years old when he founded the Black Panther Party. We lost our first member, our first treasurer, Bobby Hutton, when he was 17. Down in Southern California, where I joined the Black Panther Party, we had 3 brothers killed in 1968. Tommy Lewis and Steve Bartholomew and Robert Lawrence, and Tommy Lewis was only 17 years old, and the oldest of them was 21. So we were young, just so you know. And it's important to remember that as old as we might be today, we still lasted. So youth, the other part of it is though that youth is fleeting. So you'll be 17 today, an endangered species as a 17-year-old young black man. You already know you're an endangered species as it is. So be careful. So just on a day-to-day level. But I think that if you want to organize young people to move and act in the interest of all of our people, that's where the energy is. We know that. We know that we're looking to the young people to rise up. Any day now, I'm waiting. Please, can I tell you how to have some stuff to do? So I'd love to talk to you too. You're on the right path, but don't just exclude it and say that nobody's listening, because I'm representing a young brother who was 13 years old when he was arrested in the state of Georgia for a murder he didn't commit. And he's still in prison, convicted as an adult and tried as an adult and sentenced to an adult facility, 14 years old, sentenced to life in prison. And he's 32 years old now, be 19 years down this month. So being young is whatever it is, but it isn't a defining thing, because you can be young or middle or old, but I think we need your leadership, because one of the things that youth has is it's not afraid anymore. Young people don't think they're going to die anyway. So we're looking to you to be the vanguard, just take the lead. That's what we did. But we were young, believe it or not, at one time, and so it's your turn, brother. Go ahead.
October 20th through 23rd.
Oakland, California.
Oakland, California.
Come online. We have a website. I don't know if we can get to put it up, but it's on the cards. Go on the website, register for events, and join us in commemorating the founding of the Black Panther Party 50 years ago.
Ladies and gentlemen, Elaine Brown.